All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a couple seconds. We're going to give folks just a minute to get logged on. But we're super excited to have today's class as our first class for the year. And it's going to be winter garden prep, pruning tips and techniques. And today we have actually a new instructor with us today. So I'm super excited for you to meet her. I'm going to go ahead and give about 20 more seconds for folks to log on. Okay. All right. So good morning, everyone. Today's class is winter garden prep and pruning tips and techniques. I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping items. So please, if you have any questions, don't hold back. Go ahead and ask the questions in the Q&A box, and we will answer them at the very end. So as you're thinking of the questions, please just go ahead and drop them in there. And the class will be about 45 minutes with about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. We are scheduled to go up to 11 a.m. if need be, but most of our classes that are usually online and within the hour. So that's what you can expect today. Some frequently asked questions. Our webinar recording will be posted on our website and available to watch next week on our landscape and gardening workshop page. And then if you have any questions or concerns, or if we don't get to answer your question today, and we tell you we're going to get back to you, my contact information is actually right there. So please shoot me a quick email and I'll be sure to get back to you. Or you could just simply reply to the Zoom reminder. Just a little bit about SCV Water and who we are. We're a full-service regional water agency located in Santa Clarita Valley. We were formed on January 1st of 2018 by the state legislature, SB 634. And so we provide water to nearly 200 square miles. And we also have about 75,000 service connections. So we service about nearly 300,000 people in the Santa Clarita Valley. Some quick landscape resources, additional to what we're going to be covering today in the workshop. Our Garden Smarter publication is a great resource. It's been out for about a year, a little over a year now, but it's a great resource. We also have other resources on our website, such as our self-guided landscape tour, tips for replacing your lawn with colorful and efficient alternatives, and our top 100 SCV friendly plant guide that includes trees, shrubs, succulents, and it has 50 native plants and 50 non-native, which are still water wise though. So I highly recommend actually looking at that. I'll drop a link to it at some point during the presentation so you can visit that after. And one program that I really want to talk about today, just to kind of push it out there, just because spring is the next season, and it's our smart irrigation controller rebate. You get up to $150 for that, and you could use your smartphone to manage irrigation from anywhere. So you could get these at your local Home Depot or Amazon. They run about $200, could be about $150. But it's a great thing to have, and you can control it from your phone. So let's say you're on vacation and it starts raining, and it's raining in Santa Clarita, you could turn it off from there. It's also weather-based, so it's a great thing to have if you want to make your landscape a little more smart. Our next workshop is going to be the part 1 of Introduction to Landscape Design, and that'll be on February 22nd at 9 a.m. And it's also a Zoom webinar. And we'll have 2 instructors for that to kind of just go over landscape design basics. And then we'll have a part 2 in March where you'll actually come in and we'll work directly with the pros. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Anne. She's our instructor for today. Anne Gutierrez is a licensed architect. She's a landscape designer and a certified native plant landscaper who brings a unique blend of creativity and ecological expertise to every project. She was born and raised in the vibrant Mexico City and now is based in Los Angeles. Anne's designs reflect a deep appreciation for cultural heritage and the natural world. When she's not crafting sustainable spaces, you'll find her exploring the art of printmaking or embracing her love of plants on leisurely hikes, frequently pausing to marvel at every leaf, flower, and seed pod. She's a passionate advocate for native flora and combines her artistic eye with the dedication to creating landscapes that are as functional as they are beautiful. Whether designing a space, creating art, or just stopping to smell the sagebrush, Anne thrives at the intersection of design, nature, and creativity. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Anne. I will be in the background in case anybody needs me.
Hi, thanks so much, Laura. That was so nice. It's so great seeing the resources and the time spent to help promote more sustainable practices. Thank you all for joining us today and taking some time out of your Saturday to talk plants and pruning and maintenance with me. I'm going to share my screen and we can begin the class. Okay, can you tell me if you see the screen, Laura?
There we go.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we're going to talk winter garden prep. So as the days slowly stretch longer, California's winter months bring a delightful mix of surprises. We can get cozy, rain-soaked mornings and also very windy evenings, as we've recently saw. This is a perfect time to tune into your garden's needs and set the stage for the rush of spring that is just around the corner. So in this class, we're going to cover a couple sections. The first section is going to be supplemental irrigation. As we know, we're in a dry January. We're going to be talking about pruning, what, whos, and hows. We're going to be talking about winter propagation, planting, and sowing. We're going to talk about pest control. And lastly, we're going to talk about mulching. So these are kind of the tasks that we're talking about for the winter. All right, so we have seen the devastation caused by the fires in this very incredibly dry January. January is usually our wettest month of the year, but you know, Santa Ana's and other issues have brought around an incredibly dry year. What does that mean? It means that we're going to have to play the role of Mother Nature and hose in hand, go out there and water your garden, you know, if Oregon is permitting. I know that some people may be in fire affected areas where they're not allowed to water. If you are allowed, this is the right time to go give your plants a drink. Even though most native California plants are adapted to being weeks without water, especially during that summer, plants really do rely on water during the winter to set the stage for spring. So skipping watering in a dry January could leave recent plantings, February bloomers, and even fragile seedlings high and dry. So this really is a good time to get out there and water. And I know we're getting some rain this night, hopefully, and over the weekend. So that should be really helpful in supplementing that need that our plants have. Now we're going to talk about pruning. So I think it's very important to approach pruning from more plan-based than just getting out there with your with your snipper. So it's important to take a moment to review what plants you want to prune and what's the specific purpose. So usually a good cue is dormancy, and dormancy, or the period just before new growth begins, is often an ideal indicator for what plant you want to prune. As you know, pruning creates a wound. So dormancy is a good time because your plant is not is less stressed, but also just before new growth begins, it's a good time to prune because that wound will seal with that growth. So it's important to create that game plan of what are you pruning. You need to consider your goals. Like, are you managing size of a plant? Or are you removing dead branches? Are you enhancing focal points and trying to do something more sculptural? Are you addressing a plant that's gone really leggy and gangly? Or are you aligning with just a preferred garden style? So all of this kind of helps guide what you want to do and when you get out there with your pruners. So here on the right, there's a little diagram of different cuts that you could potentially do. So, you know, the first one above, you're cutting just above a promising bud, that's going to stimulate growth. So every pruning action that we do, every pruning cut is either stimulating growth or decreasing the growth from somewhere to stimulate it somewhere else. So here, if we're cutting this just above a promising rod, we're stimulating those spots below. If you're cutting just above a promising side branch, you're removing that energy that's going into this competing branch and focusing it on this branch. If you cut to remove a main branch or trunk, you are reducing that size, and so you're encouraging the energy to flow to the main trunk. And you can also cut to the ground, which stimulates the root growth and then creates an invigoration for the coming season. So a really good resource to knowing when or what you should be pruning from the lens of California natives is Calscapes. If you're not already familiar with it, it's a fantastic database of California native plants. And a good example of this is a California wild rose that I just went in and took a couple images from. Here you can kind of see the plant overview, and it tells you that it's a shrub, and it gives you the sign that it's a winter deciduous dormancy. And so here it's a good indicator that this plant can probably be pruned during winter. Okay. Other common California natives to prune, just as a little quick reference guide. They're all here. There's some of them are wild rose grapes, red buds, fuchsias, yarrows, Matilica poppies, saltbush, sagebrush, the canyon sunflower, bush sunflower, fuchsias, mugworts, coyote bush, tuyan, California black walnut, cottonwood, and elderberries, amongst many, many, many others. These are just some of the most common ones that are found in some of our gardens. All right, so then what not to prune in winter, it's also just as important. So we won't want to prune woody chaparral plants because as we get rains, it just invites fungal disease into that woody growth. So that's best to prune during their summer dormancy. And a good example of that is Ceanothus here on the right with the blue flowers and most types of manzanitas. Okay, so now I think most people have probably heard about the 4 Ds of pruning: the dead, diseased, damaged, and deranged. So that's usually another good guideline of what to prune. So you want to prune what's dead, right? You want to remove dead branches, which can be identified by wilted leaves, lack of bark, sunken areas, discoloration, oozing, and many, many other factors. But when you know that a branch is dead, best to take that off. Remove diseased areas. That's very important because it can affect, you can limit where that disease is and prevent it from spreading. You want to remove damaged branches. So this can invite pests as well. It can also structurally impact your plant. So best to take that out. And then you can also remove deranged branches. These are branches that cross or rub against other branches or break the rhythm of the tree structure. So all of these are usually good cues to go ahead and prune. And then now we're going to get into specific pruning techniques. Pruning trees is really a whole world. There's an entire certification for becoming an arborist, and there's so much to say here, but I'm just going to give you some very, very quick basic guidelines if you want to make some cuts. If you're unsure about pruning your tree, best to consult a certified arborist. All right. So one of the basic tenets of pruning trees is thou shalt not create a stump. So when pruning trees, it's very important to preserve the branch color of the tree, which is vital for the tree to grow over the wound. This helps seal that cut. Cutting beyond the color leaves a stump. So you leave like a little rugged stump, which won't heal. And that invites disease and decay and many other things. So here on the right, we see two good diagrams of proper pruning. So where it says branch color here, that's the ruggedy connection from branch to trunk. And we want to prune just above that. And the diagram here says how to properly prune. You basically end up making the cut from C to D. That's in both diagrams. You do not want to be making a cut way up here and just leaving it. That's the stump. Other basic rules. You usually want to keep about 2/3 of the branches that are on the tree. You don't want to cut more than that being 1/3 of the branches. Again, if you're curious about doing more specifically for fruits or for protected trees, really do consult a certified arborist. It's such a great investment in your tree care. All right, now getting more into pruning shrubs and flowers. Deadheading. I'm sure many of you have done this or are familiar with this, but deadheading is usually done when you want to create a longer blooming period or when you want to rejuvenate the plant or spruce up the appearance by removing the stalks and the seed heads of the plants. So you're literally taking that head. So this method should be practiced on native perennials, annuals, and non-woody plants. And usually you will do this at the end of their blooming cycle if you're trying to encourage a longer blooming cycle, or an early fall, and that is just because that seed head has been spent. I personally really enjoy leaving that seed head out for a couple of months. It's going to be really helpful for all those birds that need that food source, and it's also helpful to allow that plant to self-germinate, because I'd always like for a couple more of those plants to prop up. Good examples of deadheading are usually penstemons, monkey flowers, and California poppies. They take really well to this. Now we're talking about pinching or tipping. So pinching and tipping involves removing the tip of the stems, and it's ideally done in young plants and perennials. So this is a very gentle pruning method, and you really just use the tip of your fingers to do this. And it shortens twigs about an inch long or a quarter inch in diameter. It helps reduce the plant's canopy, but it also is minimal in its impact. You really don't want to take away tiny flowers or buds or stems from this. You just want to take that top green growth. You usually tip plants about twice a year during rapid growth and after their flowering period. And woody natives respond particularly well to this, where they produce new growth just below that cut. Again, all pruning either improves growth somewhere else or decreases it from somewhere to relocate that growth. So here you can see in this diagram, pinching out terminal tips stimulates buds in the area to grow. So if you take out this cut, you're stimulating those side branching. Okay, now thinning. Thinning is a process of removing entire stems or branches at the base, and usually do this to improve light flow through the plant, airflow, or to promote healthier growth. So this method highlights the natural shape and habit of woody plants while supporting their upward and outward growth. So thinning can be done in most plants, and it also can be done just for a sculptural look. And in this diagram, you kind of see this large plant, and then here, by taking out this branches, you are left with a much more airy plant. So, oh, 1 second. Apologies, someone was at the door. All right, and now we're going to talk about heading back. Heading back is a process that involves cutting all the stems of the plant, and usually you do this about to the same height. A light heading back trims just the tips, while a hard heading back prunes the stems almost down to the plant base. Most natives respond well to this, to a light heading back, which helps produce new stems and branches at the cut points. Here's a good diagram of like what heading back can look like. So here we head back all the way. This is kind of the growth that you're going to look at, versus thinning, which is what we just discussed earlier, and the growth that it produces. So here it's more of a choice of what you want and how you want your plant to look. So you're really trying to look into the future when you're pruning. What am I stimulating? Where am I going to produce this new growth? And then we can also talk about shearing and hedging. I think sometimes there's a misconception that native plants are not good for hedges or for visual barriers, but yeah, there's many great options. So when you want to create a formal hedge, you need to shear plants about 2 to 3 times a year, especially during their new growth. And then some examples of California natives that are good screening options include chamise, Howard McMean manzanita, the sunset manzanita, coyote bush, Yankee Point sonatas, Pacific Wax myrtle, hollyleaf cherry, California coffee berry, scrub oak, spiny red berry, lemonade berry, California grape, and desert grape. There's many options. But it's very important to remember that hedges should be wider at the base and narrower at the top to ensure even light distribution. If the top is wider, the lower branches may die due to that lack of light. And it's important to not let that happen, because that dense growth cannot regenerate from old wood at the base of the hedge. Shearing essentially consists of multiple tipping cuts. So previous one, we talked about tipping. So this is what we're doing to a hedge. We're just doing multiple of these basically to form that denser growth. And now we're talking about cup icing. This technique cuts a woody plant or tree down to at least 6 inches above the ground. This is usually done when you want to reinvigorate older plants or encourage upright shoots. So basically when you want either a tree or a shrub to have the appearance of this new appearance of like a much more branched growth. So good examples of this are Western redbuds, American dogwoods, chamise, cottonwoods, and jojobas. And it's important to note, if you do this with something that can be a tree, like a Western redbud can be a single stem or a multi-trunk tree, when you do this, you're basically making it be more of a shrub look. So again, it's more about knowing what you want your plants to look like from this pruning methods. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about mowing. Most people don't consider that California natives can also be wild grasses and things that you can mow, but there's many options. So there's many shrubs and grasses that tolerate mowing with a lawn or brush mower, which cuts them down to the ground. Fescues can be mowed at least once or twice a year. Blue gum can be mowed monthly, even during the warmer months, and up to 3 inches tall. Coyote bush and poverty weed can be mowed in winter if they become too tall. And it's important to just, after mowing, lightly fertilize with nitrogen if the plant needs it to aid in its recovery, because it is quite a stressful thing to do. And then I also wanted to give you a couple options of good California native lawn alternatives that I personally like and have used. If you're thinking of removing areas of your lawn and go for something that's a little more water-wise, this first one, mulled creeping red fescue, I think it's a fantastic option. Bent grass is also good. Blue gamma is also good. And I'm giving you one more that's not a grass, but yarrow makes for fantastic ground cover as well, and it can be mowed. And then now we're going to talk about a couple of the tools that I personally use. I usually use bypass pruners and handsaws the most. I don't really use any mechanical equipment beyond for mowing. The reason for this is I want to be more delicate with my choice of cuts. And I just find that this is more helpful in doing in being considerate in what you want to do for pruning. So it's important to keep your tools healthy. Tools should be oiled and cleaned after each use to avoid rust, but it's also really important to sanitize your tools. So disease can spread from plant to plant if the tools are not sanitized after each use on a single plant. So my rule of thumb is I carry a little spray bottle of alcohol and water, and after I'm done cutting or pruning a plant, I'll sterilize it with a quick spray, and then I'll move on to a different plant. This really helps decrease the chance of spreading disease. Now we're going to talk about propagation. And again, propagation is a whole world, and there's so much to talk about here, but I'm just going to give you what I think is enough information to get you through the door and get you out there and doing your best to propagate some cuttings. So winter is a really good time for cuttings because it's a moment of dormancy and slow growth. And so dormant hardwood cuttings from deciduous plants and semi-hardwood cuttings from evergreens can both be successful during this time. You can take the cuttings usually around the morning when plants are most hydrated, and you really want to avoid taking cuttings during windy days because again, that's just gonna take out more moisture from our plants than we really want to. And then these are the guidelines. I'm going to go quickly to them, but again, you're going to be giving this information. So if you want to take more time and go through it with care, if you want to go do some propagation, you will have this information. So you first need to select and cut what you want to take. Usually about healthy stems, about 1/8 to 1/2 inch thickness is good. And that is in its diameter of girth. And usually you want to be looking for at least 4 to 6 nodes within that stem that you're going to be taking, which is about 4 to 5 inches in length for that first cut. You want to make a diagonal cut at the bottom of where you're taking that cutting. And this is really important because I cannot tell you the amount of times when you're going through a lot of cuttings and you forget which one's the bottom, which one's the top of the cutting. So you do that just to indicate which one's going to go into the rooting medium, okay? And then when you prepare the cuttings, you want to remove leaves and buds from the lower 2/3. Some people even go 1/2, but yeah, you really want to take that vegetation off. And you want to trim, if the leaves are very large, you want to trim them down so that there's less energy being spent in those leaves. And if you're handling multiple cuttings, place them in water until you're ready to pot them or transfer them to that medium. So for the rooting agent and planting, you want to dip the lower diagonal end into that rooting hormone. And usually there's many different types of rooting hormones, and they all come with their instructions of how to prepare that. And then you insert the cutting to about 2 or 2.5 inches into that rooting medium. For soft cuttings, you want to make a little hole with a pencil or a divot before, so that you're not bending that cutting when you're putting it into the medium. You water thoroughly and you position in an area with indirect light. For their care, you want to keep the medium moist but not waterlogged. You can mist it occasionally if you want. And the new growth should appear in about 1 to 2 months. Don't resist the urge to tug on it. Just be patient, to get exercise and patience. And then for its transplantation, once new growth is visible, you can move it. You can move the cutting to a smaller pot. And then plants in pots need more care than plants in soil sometimes. So it's important to do regular watering and fertilize as needed. So here are some good plants for winter propagation if you're eager to get out there. Peyote bush makes fantastic for propagation. California grape is also a good one. Island snapdragon, manzanitas, mulefats, toyon, and willows are really good for and very good beginner-friendly propagation from cutting plants. Here's the little diagram of what we just talked about in terms of how to process those cuttings. First, on here to the left, you remove all the flowers or stems from the bottom half or 2/3 of the cutting. And then you cut off the leaves just ensure that you're cutting off those leaves, but retaining those nodes. And then here is an example of very large leaves that have been cut by half. And then small branchlets may be left to create a dresser shrub. That's totally fine if you have small branchlets in it. All right, now we're going to talk about a different way of propagating, which is from thickets. So some plants are really good at naturally self-propagating in winter. They make it easier for themselves to multiply. A good example is Oregon grape. And they form root suckers that create dense thickets of clones. These suckers already have stems and roots attached, like in the image here, which makes them really good candidates for cutting and transplanting. So to propagate from thickets, you simply cut suckers with ample roots and replant to an established new clump. So you basically cut off that clone and you move it to where you want to place it next. Some other good examples of shrubs with suckering habits can be propagated similarly, including berberis species, the common snowberry, Coulter's Motilia poppy, bald milk orange, and the Douglas spirea. And then, so again, these are some of the examples of some of those plants that can be propagated by thickets. And then there's also propagating by layering. You may have already even seen this happening naturally in your garden or in the wild, but layering is a pretty easy and effective way to propagate vine-like flexible plants. So what you need to do is simply nick a branch away from the plant center and bury the nicked portion. So you basically create a tiny little cut and then you bury it in the ground. Over the time, roots will develop, allowing you to carefully then cut it off of the main plant and transplant that into a new space, or leave it where you want it. So for this, it's important to consider that these plants do need to be vine-like or flexible because you are bending that plant away from the origin plant. Here you can kind of see some examples of propagating by layering. There's also more complex layering methods, which include air layering, but that's a whole world. We don't have to get into it. But yeah, you can do it by simple layering. So it's just you taking one single branch. You could do a serpentine layer, which is like this Loch Ness monster looking snake, where you make one branch have multiple layering propagation moments. You can do tip layering where you entirely bury the tip of a plant, trench layering, or even mound or stool layering. So there's multiple ways you can explore with it, and I encourage exploration. There's some good examples of plants that you can propagate by layering, or some manzanitas, especially the kinnikinic versions, species. And many mat forming perennials are also very good at this. So many of our California berries are really good at this, especially the blackberry. Yeah. So again, some of the good candidates is blackberry that we talked about, kinnikinic, California wild rose, and pink honeysuckle, which is also this beautiful vine-like plant. And then another really good thing to do during winter is to plant. I think a lot of people consider fall the best time for planting, and usually that is great. But winter is also a good time for planting because in most of our areas we have mild winter areas, so we're still reducing that risk of roots dying out. Yeah, and we allow those plants to establish themselves effectively during this season, just as well as during autumn. So for planting, I think planting is crucial, and it's important to take care in planting, especially California natives. It's not just, digging a hole and throwing it in there. There's a little more to it. So for planting, the preparation, you want to soak. So you want to water your plants thoroughly the day before planting to reduce that transplant shock. You want your plants to be completely saturated with water so that when they go in, it's not just all sucked away by that dirt. You dig the hole and you make the hole twice as wide as the pot and slightly narrower than its depth. So twice as wide as the pot shown here and just slightly less deep than the pot so that that base of the pot can be a little elevated. Then you go ahead and you pre-water the hole. You fill that hole up to the brim, and then you let it drain. And then if that soil has been incredibly dry for many months, you can repeat this a couple times. And then for planting, you take your plant out and you want to usually do as little root disturbance as possible. If you see that those roots are girdling, or if there's something weird with it, you can pull in it a little bit, but usually you want to do as minimal disturbance as possible. Then you set the root ball slightly above ground level, usually about a quarter to a half inch just above that ground level. And then you backfill with your soil and pack gently. Optionally, you can also create a water berm around the plants, and that is to hold more water in. You really only want to do this if you're hand watering those plants. If you have an irrigation system, you want to skip the berm. And yeah, just a little diagram of how to plant, do's and don'ts. And then you'll want to mulch your plant. Usually you want to add about 3 to 4 inches of mulch around the plant, keeping it between 2 to 3 inches away from the stem. You really don't want any of that mulch to be up against your plant. And a fun little thing to do is you can also add a nurse rock. This aids moisture retention and temperature moderation. You place it at the southernmost area of the plant, and it just helps the plant regulate the heat better. And then for its initial watering right after planting, you want to usually, if you have a berm, you want to fill the berm around 2 to 3 times. If you don't have a berm, usually the rule of thumb is like 1 gallon plants will get 3 gallons of water. And another excellent thing to do during winter is to sow more wildflowers. So even though seeds sown in autumn are great, early winter typically produces larger plants and showier flowers. Some autumn plants produce larger plants and showier flowers, but sowing additional seeds can extend your blooming period. And they just are such an excellent source of pollinator habitat. So how do you sow wildflowers? So usually you will first have to prepare the soil. You clear the area of weeds and grass, but you really don't want to be doing any tilling or digging. This can cause more of that seed bank of weeds to come up. Seeds can be sown over mulch as long as it's very thin. A thick layer of mulch obviously blocks light, air, and soil contact. That is essential for germination. So when you sow seeds, you want to scatter seeds evenly and gently over mildly raked soil. You cover it lightly with about 1/8 of an inch of soil. This may be counterintuitive, but you really don't want to compact it too much or cover it with a thick layer of compost or soil. A lot of native wildflower seeds need some amount of air to be able to germinate. Um, and then yeah, so you're just basically covering them just enough in order to be able to protect them without burying them too deeply. To sow wildflowers, you need to water them immediately after sowing. You can use a gentle spray or a rose head if you've ever heard of that to avoid displacing the seeds. A water breaker fan, spray nozzle, or a soft sprinkler head works well. You want to keep the soil consistently moist for that germination period. You do not want to be waterlogged, but you do need constant moisture to avoid those young sprouts from dying out. And usually you do this until seedlings are a few inches tall. Then you do watering as needed, especially during dry spells. My favorites, and I think two standout native wildflowers for spring blooms are elegant clarkia, which is the middle one right here, and of course the California poppy. Though Theater Pain, for those of you that know this fantastic nursery, they sell really great seed mixes already. So you buy a bag and it comes with multiple wildflower seeds that you can sow directly into your garden. All right, now we're going to talk about pests because with rains usually comes some type of pests. Even though we haven't gotten any yet, hopefully we're about to. So with pests, not every pest is equally harmful. Some pests are worth tolerating, while other pests can cause significant damage. So we're going to be talking about some of the more common pests during winter. I'm sure many of you have encountered ants and aphids. They usually come together. Argentine ants, or the common house ants, are often accompanied by aphids because they farm the aphids for food. Usually a strong jet of water from a hose can dislodge them, but for severe infestations, you could use a bait station. You can also take a glove and physically like wipe off the plant of aphids. This is very common also in plants like milkweed, and you can just use a glove to wipe it off. Usually that's enough to control the damage. Beetles. Beetles are a bigger deal. Beetle infestations, particularly bark beetles and ambrosia beetles, pose a serious threat to oaks and ten oaks by spreading fungi that can quickly kill even very mature trees. Usually, we want to be looking for dark or oozing patches of white sawdust-like frass on the trunk for the signs of infestation, and below is an image of an infested tree for reference. If you detect any of these signs, you really want to contact an arborist immediately. This, it's likely that the tree will need to be removed. There's very little ways of managing this, but it's important to take action as this beetles can spread very quickly through very important trees in our regions. Another common pest is deer. If you're in a deer-prone area, deer can damage your plants. An easy way of protecting them is to add chicken wire cages and secure them tightly. Deer are very, very strong. You will need to anchor them if they're very persistent. Usually it's not so much a problem when they are mature. They won't kill off the plants, but when you're dealing with younger plants, it's important to protect them. Another common pest are snails and slugs. These plants are particularly harmful to native seedlings and those very precious wildflower terminations. And then some effective remedies can include beer traps. You may have seen it on Instagram or something like that, but they are actually helpful. If you place a saucer of beer or a mixture of yeast, sugar, and water in a shallow depression on your soil, slugs will go into that trap, but they cannot escape. Another way is creating lures, which are usually overturned pots or raised boards where somewhere that's dark and moist where slugs can go into and hide. And then you just pick that up and you dispose of the slugs. You can also use barriers. Copper tape can protect raised beds, while oak or gravel mulch help deter slugs as well. In water scarce gardens, these type of pests is not so much of an issue because they usually are drawn to those more moist environments. And then squirrels and rabbits. You see, oftentimes squirrel and rabbit damage is mistaked for deer. They can look very similar, but their solution is also very similar. You can use chicken wire cages to shield young vulnerable plants from these smaller pests. And now we're going to be talking about mulching. Late winter is a really good time for mulching. Mulching helps suppress weeds that could come up from those rains. It helps prevent erosion. It reduces muddy areas during wet spells and retains soil moisture during those dry spells. So some notes for effective mulching. You just want to, because we have been talking about sowing, planting, you want to avoid compacting wet soil in planting areas when you're mulching. So be careful where you're stepping if you just recently planting. And then remember to skip mulching over freshly sown wildflower seeds. You can just basically harm any growth there, or just cancel anything that you have planted out by mulching over it. Some key considerations in mulching. So when you're talking about mulch, you want to consider, what are you trying to do in terms of moisture retention? Do you want to increase it or do you want to decrease it? Wood chips, the larger here on the right, the larger types of mulch can hold on to moisture and then slowly distribute into the soil. Sawdust, on the other hand, is really good at shedding moisture. So usually you want to be in a good balance. You want to allow mulch to dry out between waterings. You don't want to have constantly wet mulch. That can lead to fungal pathogens, and then which can harm our plants. And then it is also very, very important to always know, keep mulch away from the trunk and root crowns of our plants. So here on the right, on the bottom, you can see they leave a nice bit of space around the plant without any mulch, so that moisture in the mulch is not constantly rubbing up against our plants, which can cause damage. All right, sorry. When you're choosing the mulch, so not all mulch is the same. Your choice depends a lot also on your garden style and your plant mix and what kind of gardens and plants you have in your space. So some good examples are for woodland gardens. Woodland gardens have dense canopies, a lot of rich leaf litter. So using mulch that can mimic that, such as the redwood or pine or oak mulch to again mimic that rich leaf litter. For oak woodlands and Mediterranean style gardens, you can use a mixture of organic mulch, so some woody type of mulches mixed in with rocks and gravel. That's much more helpful. For chaparral plants or chaparral gardens, it's important to remember that these plants evolved in relative nutrient poor soil. And so organic mulch should be used much more sparingly, because too much organic matter in our soil can actually harm our plants. So rocks and gravel are a great source for these, and not only do they inhibit weeds, they're fireproof. You can get creative with your mulch combinations. I personally like the look of multiple different mulches in a garden. So for some more formal aspects of the garden, you can use bark or pine chippings for a polished look. Pine bark mulch works well for delicate plants like ferns and western azaleas. So that's more like the left one. And for oak gardens, you can collect oak leaves and use them as mulch in informal areas or paths. They also help suppress weeds and add a natural touch. This is an example of a planting area with oak leaf as the path and the mulch for the path. Another great source is plants and rocks. So usually after clearing weeds, their soil can be quickly invaded by weeds again and by those seeds. So mulching is really important to prevent this. And to mulch, there's many alternatives, and some of those include rocks and plants that can offer practical solutions. For rocks, you can gather them from your own garden or you can buy them, but rocks help stabilize the soil. They help prevent erosion, and they just add visual interest all around. So a good example of a mixture of soil is here. Apologies. I think I accidentally muted myself. But yes, like here's a good example of some different ways of using blackstone and pea gravel as mulch. And then another great thing that we can use to help suppress those weeds are actually fast germinating plants. These plants will outcompete some of those weeds and will just look beautiful. Great example is the California poppies, Celosia californica. They not only germinate quickly, they grow very well, and they're easy to manage once established. And they're also very good at self-sowing. So it is important that as your garden matures, weeds will become less of a concern, and the garden will naturally produce its own mulch in roughly the right amount so that you can distribute it where needed. So there's less effort needed as your garden is older and more mature. So many native gardens benefit from allowing bare patches of dirt to reappear. These exposed areas provide essential habitat for beneficial ground nesting insects, including native bees, that support your garden's overall health and biodiversity. So as you know, your garden becomes more mature, you can allow a little bit of that mulch to be removed and to let some of the bare patches of soil reappear. And this really helps with some of our native pollinators and helps your gardens too. And then lastly, another fun little activity that you can do while you're during the winter months is to create a bug snag or insect hotels. And it's a very simple way to support biodiversity in your garden. It's beneficial for insects like the native bees, ladybugs, and lacewings. And then they use this spaces to nest and rest, contributing to pest control and pollination. So it's very simple. All you need is 3 poles of about the same length. This can be anything from tree limb, bamboo, or cane. And then you'll need to collect a lot of organic matter from around your yard, like grease, leaves, and twigs. You'll need twine or string, and then a hammer or a rock. So the first thing you'll do is just tie those 3 poles together at the top to form a pyramid. And then using your rock or your hammer, you will drive those down so that they're secured in the ground. And you'll finally just start stacking all that organic material into the pyramid, and it will be really great for your pollinators. And then in this presentation, you'll also find just a couple of examples of what I think some really beautiful California and regionally appropriate gardens can look like. Another great resource is the Bridgeport Sustainable Garden. It is made up of almost entirely California natives and some regionally appropriate plants. It's a great source for inspiration. You can go there. They're usually labeled. If not, reach out to us and we'll tell you what the species is, or go on Calscapes and try to do an ID yourself. But yeah, I think these are just some truly beautiful California gardens, and that are made up of native species and regionally appropriate species. And then lastly, in this presentation, you'll also find a bunch of resources to supplement what Laura already gave you. These are good places to revisit anything that we talked about during this presentation. Calscapes is in there, native seeds, how to plant, lawn removal, and propagation are all in there. And yeah, and that's a presentation. Thank you so much for being here.
That was all great information, and we do have some questions. So somebody asked, what is the graph shown on the moving slide? And I think that was on the pruning one earlier in your presentation.
Let me share screen. So on the mowing, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, almost there. Oh, past it. This one?
No.
I think so.
Keep going back. It was like the hills. Yes, that one.
Yes, this one. Okay, yes. So this one's mole creeping red fescue mixed in with California poppies. So there's little pops of color here are actually California poppies. I personally, this is not a project of mine, but I personally love mixing in the grasses, yarrow and poppies. I think they add something, and they're also mowable. But yeah, this is a California, sorry, this is mole creeping red fescue, Festuca rubra molate specifically. This is a clumping grass, so you will not get the same effect as a very flat, like a Kentucky bluegrass, very flat grass. But you will get this very beautiful rolling mounds that can be mowed.
Okay, next, somebody asked if you could please demonstrate how to cut diagonal for propagation. So like, how would you?
Course. So I wish this was a better image or a better diagram, but basically you're taking about a 4 to 5 cut of that on that stem. So if this is my stem, or if this is my stem, I'm trying to cut about minimum of 4 to 5 degree. Okay. That is both to expose a little bit more of that tissue to that hormone that we're going to be using into that planting um, material, but it is also to remember which one's the bottom because you don't want to be planting it the other way around. Okay.
Okay, so regarding sowing wildflowers, what if you have mostly clay soil?
You can still sow wildflowers. Actually, that's such a great question. So, if you have mostly clay soil, you probably struggled with planting in the past. It's like usually harder to dig into, but we're here. Most of these are fantastic at breaking up that clay soil. So these will help improve your conditions, your soil conditions, and many of these are adapted to clay soils. Another really good resource if you want to go in Cowscapes and you want to search through their wildflower database, it will show you what type of soil they are most used to. If you also go to a nursery like Peter Payne, you can also talk to one of their specialists and they can give you tips of what are really good ones for clay soil specifically. But yes, you still want to do that first initial raking specifically for this because otherwise when you start spreading your seed, not only will they just all flush out with that initial watering, but they can also be picked out by birds and things like that. So it will be important if you have a clay soil to do that initial raking to protect the seeds with that 1/8 inch layer of soil. But you can do it. It's a great thing to do in clay soils.
Yeah, I have clay soil, so I'm like, okay, I have to try this year.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's still winter. It's a great time. Do it.
Okay, next question. Is there a need to add anything on the branch after pruning to prevent disease?
No. So depends. So complicated question. So I'm assuming they're talking specifically about trees. Um, we are only going to be pruning trees that can be pruned during winter, which is usually winter dormant trees. There's many trees that we would prefer to wait, even if they're winter dormant, until after the wet seasons, because we do not want to invite that moisture into the branch. But no, you do not want to be adding anything on top of it. I think a lot of those products have now been they've been the Mythbusters, like you don't want to be adding that on here. What's very important to help that wound seal is to make a proper pruning cut. So I didn't go into it too much here, but A, B, C, D, that's usually the cuts you're going to be making around cutting a limb off a tree. A is usually just this very small nick, and you do that so that the tree branch um doesn't rip when you make the real cut. They make this little nick, and then you do a B cut, so you cut entirely through the branch here, and that just helps remove all the weight off the branch so that you're left with a little stump that you can then cut off from C to D. When you cut right here at the branch color, you're actually stimulating a hormone at the branch color, which seals that wound. If you do not cut there, you're going to leave a stump, which is not going to be sealed for many weeks. And that's when you start inviting that disease and those pathogens into the tree. So it's very important to do the right cut and to preserve that branch color. Yeah. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, super helpful. I have a couple crepe myrtle trees and I'm like, do I need to prune those? I don't know.
You can just, if you also like, again, with trees, if you're not sure, it's always worth to consult with an arborist. You can they do online consultations and they also come to you. You can also just ask them a question there's a lot of them have social media and they're very friendly. I can give you, Laura, I can give you some links to some certified arborists and we can post them out there.
That'll be great. Okay, next question. What's the best way to prune Monrovia rose for better growth?
So roses, okay, tricky because there is truly a whole school around pruning roses. And I think, Laura, there may be a class more dedicated to pruning roses, if I'm not mistaken.
We used to do a class that was more dedicated to pruning roses. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so I guess I would like to encourage the conversation into talking maybe more about California native roses instead of traditional rose gardens, though they are beautiful. They do require a different type of care, and I think what I discussed is not super applicable to those. They have different requirements, but there are some native roses that you could consider, and I think I have an image of one of them somewhere in here. Oh, sorry. California, there's a California native rose, and it's a fantastic naturally growing rose, naturally occurring rose in California. I do have a photo of it. I know I did.
While Anne looks for that,
Ah,
John used to teach our class, and so John actually he's one of our other instructors. He's also at Green Thumb. So if you want to ask him directly about like rose care, just he would be a great resource for that.
yes, John would be a much better resource for rose care. They do have much more specialized cutting and timing. But this is a good example if you're curious about roses and like the look of roses and want to plant something in your garden. This is Rosa californica, California wild rose.
Yeah, okay, so the next question is also rose related. I have 40 rose bushes. What do I need to do now to prepare for spring? Also, where do I find a true gardener, not a mover and blower person?
Where you can find a gardener?
Yeah, a true gardener, not a mower or a blower person. I'm assuming somebody who just comes and blows the.
Okay. Yes. So, Theater Pain has a great resource of certified landscapers that you could look through. They have a database that you could put your needs into. You basically write up a post about what your needs are, and it can be viewed by their database of certified landscapers. And if somebody feels like they're a match for you, they'll reach out to you. Again, like roses require an entirely different level of expertise, and I think I will prefer to leave that to John, if that's okay. I tend to focus more on the native plants, and I wouldn't want to lead you astray.
I didn't know Theodore Payne had that resource where you could like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great. It helps a lot of people, and it doesn't necessarily have to be native plant related. Like you can post things about roses as well. Um, and yeah, and it will help match you with someone.
Awesome. Okay. Oh, there's another question. Please let me know where to find certified gardener. I didn't get the resources mentioned. Maria, we're going to send out at the very end, there's a piece slide that has a bunch of resources. But Theodore Payne is what Anne just mentioned.
Yes.
And if it's all right with Anne, I will send the copy of the PowerPoint presentation.
Mhm.
If you register through Zoom, I will have your information, so I'll just email it out to everyone. This video recording will be available on our website next week once it's ready. And so if you want to rewatch this, you're more than welcome to. And while you're out there in the garden, but yeah, I'll email out a copy of the PowerPoint. And Anne has a wonderful list of resources on top of the things that we mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. And just so to talk a little bit more about Theater Pain, if you go on their website, they'll have just a tab that says resources and find certified gardener in it. And like I mentioned, you can just literally make a little post about what your needs are, and people will reply to you if you provide your information. But Theater Pain is also just a great educational resource. They're a nonprofit, so they're not just a nursery. They also do classes. They do a lot of guidelines and a lot of outreach. So it's a nice place just to visit if you're more curious about native plants. They're a great first place to stop by. And I think for most of us in Santa Clarita, it's a fairly close, they're fairly close. It's not too far a drive. and they're gonna have a winter sale soon, I believe. So you can go buy some plants and get planting.
I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah.
That'll be great. Okay, also, I just realized that at the beginning, I told everybody it was January the 24th. It is not. It's January 25th. I now have another coffee. I am ready to start my day. But yes, our next class will be on February 22nd, and we will be covering landscape design. So if you're in the process of thinking like, I want to redo my yard, I want to remove my lawn, and I want to put in a beautiful garden, this would be the class to attend, so that you can get started on just learning about landscape design, the theory of it. Anne will be one of our presenters, and she will be more focused on native plants, right, Anne?
Yes. Yes, so exactly. We're going to be talking about the basics of landscape design and how you can take your concept or an idea that you have for what you want to make in your space and how you can make it a reality. A lot of what I'll be talking about are resources for native planting and regionally appropriate plants, but I'll have a co-presenter that can talk more to the grasses and lawns and roses even. So I think we're gonna be a good balanced
Yeah,
option.
and if you have attended our class in the past, it's Julie Molinari. She's a great resource too. And then the second part of that presentation will be in March. So, and then in March, we'll put theory into practice, and you'll come in and you'll have your pre-thought design already. And then Anne and Julie will be able to help you like modify and tweak it a little bit. And we'll also have Siobhan from SB Water to kind of go through the lawn replacement program. So if it is something you want to do and you want to get some money back, it's a great program to take advantage of right now that there's funds for it. So yeah, that's just a little plug for our next upcoming classes. I'm very excited about the workshops we have lined up this year. We've refreshed them to include more native plant education, just so we can continue to not that grass is ugly, but it just uses a lot of water, and we want to just use our water as wisely as possible, especially when we have really dry years like we have had this year. So yes, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Anne, so much for your time this morning. I think everybody, I hope, is very happy with what you have shared. If you have any questions or concerns, or just want to maybe get John's information, send me an email and I will share John's information with you all. And then thank you all for tuning in on a Saturday morning to this. We do appreciate you. And I look forward to seeing you at our upcoming classes in person. So,
Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us and looking forward to talking again soon.
all right, everybody have a great day.